Dez Bryant had a long post on Instagram with his thoughts on race in America. Dez wrote, "First and foremost, I would like to say I do a great job of minding my own business, but it's pressing on my heart to share my thoughts about white Americans and black Americans' racism. I saw a person quote Charles Barkley when he said, 'We as black people, we're never going to be successful, not because of you white people, but because of other black people.' I hate to admit it, but I understand that quote. Real question. What is wrong with being sophisticated and black? Why do we associate those who choose the straight and narrow as not being black enough? We focus hard on fighting the realities that exist instead of creating our own reality. The ones who came before us, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, paved a new path for us to follow. The struggles and hurt they endured created new life for us today. It's not our job to carry the burden, but it is our job to lead by example." Shannon, what's your reaction to what Dez wrote?
I read his post several different times. And when our producer, Chris Healy, called me and asked about it, I had not heard about it at the time. And he told me to take a look at it still. And I did. I think for me, I don't have a problem with athletes speaking up. But I want to make sure before they speak up, they read up. I came from a very difficult background also. I think a lot of people know my story. My grandmother raised her 9 kids and raised my mom's 3. And I thought a lot of the same lines earlier in my career as Dez is thinking. I made it out, why can't you? And then one day while sitting alone, I started thinking, what about the person that didn't have Mary Porter as a grandmother? What about the person that didn't have grandparents that says, okay, my grandkids' parents are getting a divorce. I'm going to Chicago and I'm going to bring them to me and put them in a situation so they can thrive. Skip, I think Dez's heart was in a good place, but because he hasn't read up enough on the race relationship and the history of racism in America, it came out totally wrong. Let me take it piece by piece if I can, Skip. First of all, he said he saw a person quote Charles Barkley. I'm going to say this. I have the utmost respect for Charles Barkley. He was a heck of a ball player. When it comes to basketball, please quote Charles Barkley. But when it comes to race in America, please don't quote Charles Barkley. Because what is happening is that, Dez, when you say personal accountability, okay, who do I hold account? So I'm supposed to hold me accountable for slavery? What about Reconstruction? What about the Jim Crow South? What about segregation? What about the violation of my civil rights and my voting rights? So who do I hold accountable for that? He also said that instead of making videos of the history of racism, we're one of the few race of people that everybody says you need to get over your past. Slavery happened 400 years. You weren't in slavery. Your parents wasn't in slavery. I have yet to hear a person tell a Jewish person, you weren't in the Holocaust. Get over it. They still do movies about the Holocaust. They still write books. No one tells them to stop. But because Dez does not understand the systemic, let me take it here. It's documented that they say the first African-American slaves arrived in the U.S. in 1619. It's 2017, so in 2 years, it'll be 400 years the first slave arrived in America. So for 400 years, there's been systemic, institutionalized racism, bias, perpetuated and perpetrated against a race of people. And Dez says, you need to be accountable. Dez, I can't get ahead if someone is constantly keeping me behind. Dez, we're not in position. We don't own TV stations. We don't own radio stations. For the most part, we're not CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. So we can't shift the dynamic of the hiring and firing practice that can lift the race of people up. Do you understand what has transpired? And people thought because we had a 2-term black president, President Obama, that 400 years of racism would be eradicated in 8 years. Think about how long it took us to get to this point. And then he mentioned some iconic figures. Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, do you actually think they did what they did for themselves? Is that what you think? You think Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat? This was about because of her? She knew the ramifications. You think Dr. King lost his life just for himself? Malcolm X lost his life only for himself? There's an incident that happened in 2011. He was issued a citation. He was at a mall with some of his friends. The police intervened and asked him to pull his pants up. So think about this, Dez. How long has that been in effect? Where the police tell you to pull your pants up. They're profiling you because they think that's the kind of criminal behavior. Mm-hmm. They didn't look at you as a Dallas Cowboy. They looked at you as any other black young man in America. That's what you don't get, Dez. So when you say personal accountability, all you do is that you feed a certain segment of the population to say, see, I told you. Dez Bryant said it. Charles Barkley said it. Dez, you're not even the 2%. You're the 0.01% of black Americans that makes millions. But there's so many that don't. Dez, do you realize that you're still black? They still view you as black, even though you catch touchdown for the Dallas Cowboys? Do you realize that? You think they view you differently? They applaud what you do, Dez. They don't applaud who you are. I commend you for changing, coming from where you came from, his story. I know a little bit about his story. If you get a chance, you can read it. I commend him, Skip. But he is so wrong. He's so absolutely and horrifically wrong in this situation. I hate when they ask us to accept responsibility for slavery, accept responsibility for the 400 years of institutional and systemic racism, the voting rights. There's some places now still that you're infringing on people's voting rights. And I'm going to say this, Skip, and I'm going to let it go. Skip, you remember this. In the late 80s, there was a crack cocaine epidemic that was wiping through America. New York, Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, LA. What did they do, Skip? They didn't say these people needed treatment. They gave you mandatory minimums. They made the sentences even tougher. They came up with the 3 strikes rule. Now there's something going on called the opiate addiction that's sweeping through the Rust Belt. That's affecting white America. And what do they say? Jail is not the answer for these people. They need treatment. You see how they did it for them and how they do it for us. So Dez, next time you speak up, make sure you read up and understand what we're actually up against. I'm not saying you should have any ill will to everybody that's treated you wrong. I judge a man by how a man treats me, not his race, by that man. And I commend you because you say you've been profiled, but you don't have ill will only against those that profiled you. But Dez, you're wrong in this instance. And you do a lot of disservice to a lot of African Americans in this country when you say we need to take more accountability when we're not in position to do a whole lot because of what's been placed upon us for the last 400 years.